You are listening to an extended audio preview of Hypersigils and Narrative Magick, written by Adam Lusum and published by LLH Media. The complete book is available from LLH Media and selected online retailers. Chapter 1, Introduction to Hypersigils. Hypersigils and Narrative Magick. Chapter 1, Introduction to Hypersigils. To understand the concept of the hypersigil, one must first appreciate the deep and complex relationship between story and reality, between imagination and manifestation. Every culture has woven tales of transformation, heroes overcoming impossible odds, and the hidden threads that link the world of ideas to the world of matter. These stories do more than entertain or instruct. They are tools, sometimes consciously, sometimes unconsciously, by which individuals and societies shape their understanding of existence, and in some cases, reality itself. The hypersigil, as a concept and practice, sits at the intersection of storytelling, personal transformation, and magic. The term hypersigil is a relatively recent addition to the lexicon of magic, but its roots run deep in the broader tradition of sigilization and symbolic art. To appreciate what sets hypersigils apart, it is necessary to first briefly revisit the history and function of sigils in magical practice. Traditional sigils are symbolic representations of an intent or desire, distilled into a unique design or glyph. The practitioner creates a statement of will, reduces it through a process of abstraction, often by removing repeating letters, rearranging the remainder, and then stylizing them into a glyph, and then charges the sigil with emotional or psychic energy, typically through a ritual or meditative act. The core idea is to bypass the conscious mind and implant the desire directly into the subconscious, where it can work without the interference of doubt, expectation, or habitual thought. The hypersigil takes this process and magnifies it, extending it from a single symbol or glyph into a complex narrative structure. Instead of a simple design, the hypersigil is a story, sometimes a novel, comic series, film, or other elaborate work of art, constructed intentionally to function as a living, evolving, magical operation. The creator weaves their intention, desire, or will into the fabric of the narrative, imbuing the characters, plot lines, and world building with personal or collective significance. The hypersigil, therefore, is not merely a passive record of an idea, but an active engine of transformation, both for the creator and potentially for the audience. The origins of the hypersigil as a formal concept are widely attributed to British comic book writer and occultist Grant Morrison, who famously described their comic series The Invisibles as a hypersigil. Morrison's articulation of the idea in the 1990s brought it to the attention of a new generation of magicians, artists, and seekers. In interviews and essays, Morrison explained that The Invisibles was designed as a multi-layered, semi-autobiographical magical operation, with the events of the story reflecting, influencing, and being influenced by events in the author's own life. The boundaries between fiction and reality became porous. Writing certain events into the story seemed to precipitate real-world analogs, and vice versa. The hypersigil, in Morrison's practice, was not only a means of personal transformation, but a tool for influencing the wider collective consciousness. While Morrison may have coined the term and popularized the practice in its modern form, the underlying principles are much older. Storytelling has always been a form of magic. Whether in the oral traditions of indigenous shamans, the mythic poetry of the ancient bards, or the esoteric allegories of Renaissance magicians. The difference lies in the degree of conscious intent and the explicit understanding of narrative as a vehicle for transformation. The hypersigil is storytelling with the volume turned up, with the intention to change the self and possibly the world. It is the use of narrative as a deliberate magical technology. To define a hypersigil, then, is to recognize it as an extended dynamic sigil cast in the medium of narrative art. It is a story, whether written, drawn, filmed, or otherwise constructed, created with the explicit purpose of enacting change in accordance with the will of the creator. The hypersigil is not limited to fiction, though fiction is perhaps its most fertile ground. Any narrative form, including memoir, performance, or collaborative storytelling, can serve as a hypersigil if approached with the right intention and magical awareness. The purpose of the hypersigil is twofold. On a personal level, it serves as a vehicle for self-transformation. By embedding one's desires, fears, hopes, and unresolved conflicts within the narrative, the creator externalizes internal processes, making them visible and malleable. The act of creation becomes a ritual, the story a mirror in which the self is both reflected and reshaped. On a broader level, the hypersigil can function as a tool for influencing collective consciousness. Stories have always had the power to shape culture, to introduce new ideas, to challenge or reinforce societal norms. When crafted with magical intent, the hypersigil becomes a means of participating in the ongoing creation of reality, contributing new patterns, symbols, and possibilities to the shared tapestry of meaning. The relevance of hypersigils in modern magical practice lies in their adaptability and potency. In an age saturated with narratives, through books, films, television, social media, and digital art, the ability to consciously harness the power of story is more vital than ever. The hypersigil offers a framework for doing so, rooted in centuries of magical tradition but uniquely suited to the challenges and opportunities of the present. It is a technology of the imagination, a method for navigating the fluid boundaries between mind and world. To further explore the origins of the hypersigil, it is helpful to situate it within the broader context of Chaos Magick, a tradition that emerged in the late 20th century as a reaction against the dogmatism and rigidity that had crept into many occult systems. Chaos magicians emphasized pragmatic experimentation, personal experience, and the use of whatever tools or symbols proved effective, regardless of their cultural or historical provenance. Sigil magic, as popularized by Austin Osman Spare in the early 20th century, became a cornerstone of chaos magical practice. Spare's approach was iconoclastic and direct. Bypass the conscious mind, implant desire in the subconscious, and let the results manifest through the natural processes of psyche and reality. Against this backdrop, the hypersigil emerged as a natural evolution. If a single glyph could encode a desire, what might be possible if an entire world, populated by richly drawn characters and unfolding over hundreds of pages or frames, were constructed as a magical operation? The hypersigil is the logical extension of sigil magic into the age of mass media and participatory culture. It is the recognition that stories are not just containers for meaning, but engines of change. The mechanics of hypersigilization are, in some ways, an amplification of those found in traditional sigil work. Where a sigil compresses intention into a symbol, a hypersigil expands it into a narrative. The process begins with the identification of a desire or intent. This might be a personal goal, healing, transformation, empowerment, or a broader aspiration, such as influencing cultural attitudes or exploring new paradigms of existence. The creator then weaves this intent into the fabric of the story, infusing characters, events, settings, and themes with symbolic resonance. The story becomes an analog for the magical operation, with each narrative development corresponding to a stage in the unfolding of the desired change. Charging the hypersigil is likewise a process of engagement and emotional investment. Where the traditional sigil is charged through ritual, meditation, or ecstatic states, the hypersigil is energized through the acts of creation and immersion. Writing, drawing, or performing the story becomes a ritual in itself. The creator invests emotional, mental, and psychic energy into the work, making it alive with intention. The process is not always linear. The story may evolve in unexpected ways, reflecting the dynamic interplay between conscious will and the deeper currents of the subconscious or collective psyche. Release, in the context of the hypersigil, often occurs when the work is completed and shared with an audience, or when the creator moves on from the narrative. Just as with traditional sigil magic, the act of letting go is crucial. The story is no longer solely the property of its creator. It enters the world as an autonomous entity, interacting with readers, viewers, or participants, each of whom brings their own energy and interpretation. The hypersigil continues to work, its effects rippling outward, sometimes in ways the creator never anticipated. One of the most compelling aspects of the hypersigil is its capacity for reciprocal influence. The boundary between creator and creation becomes fluid. Changes in the story can precipitate changes in the creator's life, and vice versa. Grant Morrison's experiences while writing The Invisibles are often cited as a dramatic example. Illnesses, accidents, opportunities, and revelations in Morrison's life were mirrored by events in the comic. This feedback loop underscores the magical principle that the imagination is not merely a passive reflector of reality, but an active participant in its unfolding. The hypersigil also invites questions about the nature of fiction and reality. If a story consciously crafted as a magical operation can influence the life of its creator and the perceptions of its audience, where do we draw the line between the imaginary and the real? The answer, from the perspective of narrative magic, is that the distinction is more porous than we often assume. Human beings are storytelling animals. We construct our sense of self, our understanding of the world, and our collective cultures through narrative. By consciously engaging with this process, the hypersigil practitioner steps into the role of co-creator, not only of stories, but of reality itself. This is not to say that every story is a hypersigil, or that every work of fiction is inherently magical. Intention is key. The hypersigil is characterized by the deliberate infusion of will, desire, or magical purpose into the narrative. It is the difference between writing a story for entertainment or catharsis and writing a story as a spell, a ritual, a transformative act. The hypersigil is a tool, and like any tool, its effectiveness depends on the skill, awareness, and commitment of its user. The implications of hypersigils for modern magical practice are profound. In an age where stories circulate at unprecedented speed and scale, the ability to craft and deploy narrative as a magical technology opens new avenues for personal and collective transformation. The hypersigil is adaptable, capable of taking almost any form: novel, screenplay, comic, video game, performance art, collaborative storytelling project. It is accessible, requiring only imagination, intention, and the willingness to engage deeply with the process. And it is powerful, capable of catalyzing changes both subtle and dramatic, inward and outward. At the same time, the hypersigil demands responsibility. The stories we tell shape not only our own lives, but the world we inhabit. Narrative is a double-edged sword, capable of healing or harming, liberating or imprisoning. The conscious practitioner of hypersigil magic must be mindful of the energies they invoke, the patterns they propagate, and the consequences, intended or unintended, of their creative acts. To practice hypersigil magic is to become a storyteller in the deepest and most ancient sense. It is to recognize that the act of creation is a sacred act, a dance between the seen and the unseen, the known and the unknown. It is to step into the current of mythic imagination that has animated humanity since the dawn of consciousness, and to use that current as a means of shaping one's destiny. The relevance of hypersigils also lies in their alignment with contemporary understandings of psychology, consciousness, and creativity. In the 20th and 21st centuries, thinkers such as Carl Jung, Joseph Campbell, and James Hillman have explored the archetypal dimensions of story and the ways in which narrative structures the psyche. Jung's concept of the collective unconscious, with its storehouse of shared symbols and myths, resonates deeply with the idea of the hypersigil as a tool for engaging not only personal, but collective transformation. Campbell's hero's journey, the monomyth that underlies so many stories across cultures, provides a template for the magical narrative, mapping the stages of transformation that the practitioner may encode into their hypersigil. Modern neuroscience and cognitive psychology likewise affirm the power of story to shape perception, behavior, and even physiology. Studies have shown that the brain responds to stories as if they were real experiences, activating the same neural pathways involved in memory, emotion, and action. Narrative is not just a metaphor for transformation, it is a mechanism by which transformation occurs. The hypersigil leverages this capacity, using story as a vehicle for changing patterns of thought, feeling, and action, both within the self and in the wider world. In practical terms, creating a hypersigil requires a combination of magical awareness, creative skill, and psychological insight. The process begins with the identification of intent. What is it that you wish to change, create, or explore? This intent must be clear, focused, and resonant, capable of sustaining the energy required for the creation of a substantial narrative. The next step is to choose a narrative form that suits your temperament, skills, and resources. This might be a novel, a comic, a film, a performance piece, or even an ongoing role-playing game. The key is to select a medium that allows for depth, complexity, and personal investment. Once the form is chosen, the practitioner begins the work of creation. Characters, settings, plot lines, and themes are developed, each carrying aspects of the intent. The process is both conscious and unconscious, deliberate and intuitive. The story unfolds, shaped by the will of the creator and the autonomy of the narrative itself. The act of creation becomes a ritual, a magical working that engages the whole self. body, mind, emotion, and spirit. Throughout the process, the practitioner pays attention to synchronicities, unexpected developments, and moments of resonance between the story and their own life. These are signs that the hypersigil is active, that the boundaries between imagination and reality are becoming permeable. The act of sharing the story, whether with a public audience or a private circle, serves as a release, allowing the magical operation to extend beyond the self and into the collective field. The after effects of a hypersigil working can be subtle or dramatic. Sometimes the desired change manifests quickly, in uncanny or serendipitous ways. Other times, the process is slow, unfolding over months or years. The practitioner may find themselves changed, old patterns dissolved, new possibilities opened, unforeseen challenges or gifts appearing on the path. The hypersigil is a living thing, its effects continuing to ripple outward long after the story is told. It is important to note that the hypersigil is not a substitute for action in the world. Magic in any form works best when coupled with practical effort, clear intention, and ethical awareness. The hypersigil is a catalyst, a means of aligning inner and outer realities, but it does not absolve the practitioner of responsibility. The stories we tell must be lived as well as written, enacted as well as imagined. The ethical dimension of hypersigil magic cannot be overstated. Narrative is a potent force, capable of shaping beliefs, behaviors, and destinies. The conscious practitioner must be vigilant against the temptation to manipulate or control others through story, to propagate harmful patterns, or to abdicate responsibility for the consequences of their creations. The hypersigil is a tool for liberation and healing, but like all tools, it can be misused. The guiding principles of respect, empathy, and integrity are as essential in narrative magic as in any other form of practice. The hypersigil also offers a unique path for those who may not resonate with traditional forms of magical ritual. For writers, artists, performers, and creators of all kinds, the act of storytelling is already a sacred practice, a means of exploring and expressing the mysteries of existence. By approaching their work with magical intent, they can transform their creative process into a powerful vehicle for personal and collective transformation. The hypersigil is an invitation to reclaim the ancient bond between art and magic, to recognize that every act of creation is an act of power. In summary, the hypersigil is an extended, dynamic narrative constructed with the explicit purpose of enacting change in accordance with the will of its creator. It is rooted in the tradition of sigil magic, but expands the process into the realm of story, leveraging the transformative power of narrative to effect change in the self and the world. Its origins lie in both ancient storytelling traditions and the modern magical innovations of chaos magicians like Grant Morrison. Its purpose is to serve as a vehicle for self-transformation and a tool for influencing collective consciousness. Its relevance in the modern world is profound, offering a flexible, potent, and accessible means of engaging with the processes of creation, manifestation, and transformation. As we move forward in this exploration, we will examine the mechanics of hypersigil creation in greater detail, explore historical and contemporary examples, and offer practical guidance for those who wish to embark on the path of narrative magic. The hypersigil is both an art and a science, a discipline and a delight. It is an invitation to step into the role of storyteller mage, to weave new patterns of meaning, and to participate consciously in the ongoing creation of reality. The journey begins with a single question: what story do you wish to tell? And what world do you wish to create? Chapter 2: The Evolution of Sigil Magic. Chapter 2: The Evolution of Sigil Magic. The concept of the sigil occupies a unique and enduring place within the history of magic. From ancient glyphs etched onto temple walls to modern digital art shared across the internet, sigils have evolved in form, function, and philosophy. This chapter explores the long, intricate journey of sigil magic, how it emerged, transformed, and adapted to new cultural landscapes, ultimately becoming a powerful tool for contemporary magicians, artists, and storytellers alike. The earliest roots of sigil magic can be traced to the dawn of human civilization, when symbols and images were first used to convey meaning, invoke power, and communicate with unseen forces. In prehistoric times, cave paintings and petroglyphs, depictions of animals, human figures, and abstract shapes, served not only as artistic expression, but also as ritualistic devices. These early marks on stone and bone were believed to influence the world, to call forth game, ensure safe passage, or protect against harm. While not sigils in the modern sense, they set the stage for a symbolic language of power. As societies grew more complex, so too did their systems of symbolism. The ancient Egyptians, for instance, developed an intricate system of hieroglyphs, each symbol imbued with religious and magical significance. Certain hieroglyphs, such as the Ankh or the Eye of Horus, were believed to carry protective and healing properties. These symbols were carved onto amulets, inscribed on tomb walls, and painted onto papyrus scrolls. In a similar vein, Mesopotamian cylinder seals, small engraved stones rolled over wet clay, functioned as both signatures and talismans, their intricate designs believed to confer authority, security, or divine favor. The use of magical symbols reached a sophisticated level in the Greco-Roman world, where the burgeoning field of Hermeticism blended Egyptian, Greek, and Jewish mystical traditions. The Hermetic texts, particularly the Corpus Hermeticum, described a universe animated by correspondences and sympathetic magic. Here, symbols served as keys to unlock hidden knowledge, to link the practitioner with cosmic forces. The Greek magical papyri, a collection of spells and rituals from the Hellenistic period, are replete with strange characters, magical names, and diagrams intended to summon spirits, heal illness, or bind enemies. These were not yet sigils in the modern sense, but they reveal an evolving understanding of how abstract symbols could channel intention and affect change. In late antiquity and the early Middle Ages, the esoteric traditions of the West underwent further transformation. The Jewish mystical practice of Kabbalah, which emerged in the 12th and 13th centuries, introduced the concept of the name of God as a potent source of magical power. Kabbalists engaged in complex permutations of Hebrew letters, believing that the correct arrangement could unlock divine energies. The Sefer Yetzirah, an early Kabbalistic text, describes the creation of the universe through the manipulation of the 22 letters of the Hebrew alphabet. This letter magic would later influence the development of Western ceremonial magic, where sigils began to take on a more recognizable form. The medieval grimoires, books of magic that proliferated across Europe from the 13th to 17th centuries, marked a turning point in the evolution of sigil magic. Texts, such as the Key of Solomon, the Lesser Key of Solomon, also known as the Lemegeton, and the Heptameron, cataloged a bewildering array of magical symbols, seals, and signatures. Here the word sigil, from the Latin sigillum, meaning seal or signet, acquired its modern connotation, a symbolic mark created for a specific magical purpose. In these grimoires, sigils were often attributed to angels, demons, or planetary intelligences. Each spirit had its own unique seal, which the magician would inscribe onto parchment, metal, or wax during ritual operations. The sigil functioned as both a calling card and a container. By drawing the sigil of a particular spirit, the magician established a line of communication, inviting its presence and influence. At the same time, the sigil was thought to bind the spirit, compelling it to obey the magician's will. The creation of these seals followed strict protocols, often involving astrological timing, consecrated tools, and elaborate invocations. Despite their complexity, the underlying principle remained the same. A symbol, properly constructed and empowered, could serve as a conduit for magical intention. As the Renaissance dawned, the Western tradition of ceremonial magic underwent a profound revival. Influenced by Neoplatonism, Hermeticism, and Kabbalah, Renaissance magicians such as Marsilio Ficino, Giovanni Pico della Mirandola, and Cornelius Agrippa sought to synthesize ancient wisdom with contemporary philosophy. Agrippa's 3 books of occult philosophy, published in 1533, became a foundational text, detailing the correspondences between planets, metals, stones, plants, and magical symbols. The Renaissance magicians placed great emphasis on the use of talismans, objects inscribed with astrological and magical symbols to attract specific influences. Sigils, in this context, were often complex diagrams combining planetary glyphs, angelic names, and geometric patterns. During this period, the art of creating sigils was further refined. The magical square, or kamea, became a popular device for generating sigils. By assigning letters or numbers to the squares and tracing a path through them, magicians could derive a unique symbol, representing a particular name or intention. This method, rooted in both Kabbalistic and Pythagorean traditions, allowed for the systematic creation of sigils, each one tailored to a specific magical operation. The magical square would later inspire the rose-cross sigil of the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, a 19th-century occult society that played a pivotal role in the modern revival of Western esotericism. The Golden Dawn, founded in London in 1887, synthesized the magical systems of the past into a comprehensive curriculum. Its members, among them W.B. Yeats, Aleister Crowley, and Arthur Edward Waite, Kabbalah, tarot, astrology, and alchemy, seeking to unlock the hidden powers of the mind and the cosmos. The Golden Dawn's approach to sigil magic emphasized both tradition and personal creativity. Members were taught to construct their own magical symbols, drawing upon the correspondences of color, sound, and number. The rose-cross sigil, for instance, encoded a name or phrase into a geometric pattern, which was then charged through ritual and meditation. It was in the early 20th century, however, that sigil magic underwent its most radical transformation. The catalyst for this change was Austin Osman Spare, an English artist and occultist, whose innovative techniques would profoundly influence the trajectory of modern magic. Spare rejected much of the ceremonial complexity of the Golden Dawn, advocating instead for a highly personal, intuitive approach to magical symbolism. In his seminal works, The Book of Pleasure, 1913, and The Focus of Life, 1921, Spare outlined a method for creating and empowering sigils that was both simple and revolutionary. Spare's system began with the formulation of a clear, concise statement of intent, what he called the desire. This statement was then reduced to its constituent letters, with duplicate letters removed. The remaining letters were artistically combined into a single, unique glyph, the sigil. According to Spare, the power of the sigil lay in its ability to bypass the conscious mind and implant the desire directly into the subconscious. Charging the sigil involved entering an altered state of consciousness through meditation, exhaustion, sexual ecstasy, or other means, and focusing on the symbol until it was forgotten. By erasing the conscious memory of the desire, the magician allowed the subconscious to work unimpeded, manifesting the intention in the external world. Spare's approach marked a decisive break from tradition. No longer was the magician required to invoke spirits, follow complex rituals, or adhere to rigid symbolic systems. The sigil became a tool of psychological magic, a bridge between the conscious and unconscious mind. This innovation would prove immensely influential, especially in the latter half of the 20th century, as magicians, artists, and thinkers sought to adapt ancient practices to the modern world. The rise of chaos magic in the 1970s and 1980s cemented Spare's legacy and propelled sigil magic into new realms of experimentation. Chaos magicians such as Peter J. Carroll and Ray Sherwin embraced a radically pragmatic, anti-dogmatic approach to magic. Their foundational texts, Liber Null and Psychonaut, Carroll, 1978, and The Book of Results, Sherwin, 1978, championed the use of sigils as the primary tool for magical work. Sigilization, as they called it, was seen as a way to bypass cultural and psychological conditioning, tapping into the raw creative potential of the mind. Chaos magicians expanded upon Spare's techniques, developing new methods for creating, charging, and deploying sigils. Some favored the traditional written glyph, while others experimented with visualizations, mantras, or even digital formats. The process typically involved 3 steps: formulation of intent, creation of the sigil, and charging, often through gnosis, a state of heightened awareness or trance. Once charged, the sigil was either destroyed, hidden, or integrated into daily life, with the practitioner striving to forget the original desire. The ethos of chaos magic resonated with the countercultural movements of the late 20th century, blending elements of punk, surrealism, and cybernetics. Sigils became a form of magical hacking, a way to rewrite the code of reality. The do-it-yourself spirit of chaos magic encouraged practitioners to experiment with new media and techniques. Some incorporated sigils into collage, graffiti, or mail art. Others used computers to generate algorithmic symbols. The boundaries between art, magic, and activism grew increasingly porous. As the digital age dawned, sigil magic underwent yet another metamorphosis. The internet, with its vast networks of communication and collaboration, provided fertile ground for new forms of magical practice. Online communities, forums, and social media platforms became laboratories for sigil experimentation. Digital artists created animated sigils, interactive sigil generators, and augmented reality experiences. The act of sharing sigils online, whether as images, memes, or viral challenges, added a new dimension to their function. Some magicians theorized that the collective attention and energy of online audiences could empower digital sigils, transforming them into egregores, or group minds. This era also witnessed the emergence of hypersigils, a concept popularized by comic book writer and occultist Grant Morrison. In Morrison's formulation, a hypersigil is an extended work of art, such as a novel, comic, or film, that functions as a magical operation in itself. Unlike traditional sigils, which are static symbols encoding a single desire, hypersigils are dynamic narratives that unfold over time. By embedding magical intent within a story, the creator can influence reality on a larger scale, shaping not only their own life, but also the collective unconscious of their audience. Morrison's comic series The Invisibles, 1994 to 2000, is perhaps the most famous example of a hypersigil. Throughout the series, Morrison wove elements of their own life, desires, and magical experiments into the narrative, treating the comic as a living, evolving spell. The events of the story, and the reactions of readers, fed back into Morrison's reality, blurring the boundaries between fiction and magic. The hypersigil thus represents a new frontier in the evolution of sigil magic, one in which narrative, art, and intention converge. The contemporary landscape of sigil magic is marked by diversity, innovation, and cross-pollination. Practitioners draw inspiration from a wide array of sources: traditional grimoires, chaos magic, digital culture, street art, and pop media. The creation and use of sigils have become deeply personal, often tailored to the individual's psychological or aesthetic preferences. Some magicians craft elaborate, intricate symbols, while others favor minimalist designs. The methods of charging and deployment vary widely, from ritualistic ceremonies to casual doodles, from solitary meditation to public performance. One notable trend in recent years is the integration of sigil magic with social activism and collective intention. Groups of practitioners have organized global sigil storms, coordinated efforts to create and deploy sigils for common goals, such as environmental protection, social justice, or healing. These collective rituals often leverage the amplifying power of the internet, encouraging participants to share and meditate upon the sigils en masse. The results, while difficult to quantify, speak to a renewed sense of community and shared purpose within the magical world. Another area of innovation is the fusion of sigil magic with technology. Programmers and artists have developed software tools for generating, animating, and encrypting sigils. Some experiment with machine learning algorithms to create new symbolic languages, while others explore the use of blockchain technology, sigils as non-fungible tokens, NFTs. The intersection of magic and technology raises intriguing questions about authorship, authenticity, and the nature of magical efficacy in a digital age. Despite these innovations, the core principles of sigil magic remain remarkably consistent. At its heart, sigil magic is about the transformation of desire into symbol and symbol into reality. Whether carved into stone, inked on parchment, or rendered in pixels, the sigil serves as a focal point for intention, a bridge between the inner world of thought and the outer world of action. The specific methods may change, but the underlying logic endures. By encoding desire into symbol and charging it with focused attention, the magician seeks to alter the fabric of experience. This evolutionary journey has been shaped by broader currents in culture, philosophy, and psychology. The rise of depth psychology in the 20th century, particularly the work of Sigmund Freud and Carl Jung, provided new frameworks for understanding the mechanisms of magic. Jung's concept of the collective unconscious, with its archetypes and symbols, resonated deeply with magicians. The idea that symbols could access hidden layers of the psyche, or even tap into universal patterns, helped legitimize sigil magic in the eyes of both practitioners and scholars. At the same time, the influence of surrealism and other avant-garde art movements encouraged experimentation with automatic writing, collage, and other techniques for bypassing the rational mind. the boundary between art and magic became increasingly blurred, with artists such as Spare, Leonora Carrington, and Alejandro Jodorowsky exploring the transformative potential of symbols and narrative. In the late 20th and early 21st centuries, the rise of participatory and interactive art further expanded the possibilities for sigil magic, inviting audiences to become co-creators in magical acts. The democratization of magic, spurred by the availability of books, zines, and later the internet, has also played a crucial role in the evolution of sigil magic. No longer confined to secret societies or elite circles, the practice has become accessible to anyone with curiosity and intent. The proliferation of online tutorials, workshops, and communities has enabled a new generation of practitioners to learn, experiment, and share their experiences. This openness has fostered a spirit of innovation and inclusivity, allowing sigil magic to adapt to diverse cultural contexts and personal needs. Yet, for all its innovations, sigil magic continues to grapple with questions of efficacy, ethics, and meaning. What does it mean to charge a sigil in an age of information overload and fragmented attention? Can collective intention, mediated through digital networks, achieve tangible effects in the world? How does the commodification of symbols, as in the case of NFTs, affect their magical potency? These questions reflect broader tensions within contemporary culture, as we navigate the interplay between tradition and innovation, individuality and collectivity, materiality and virtuality. In tracing the historical development of sigil magic, it becomes clear that the practice is not static but dynamic, continually reinventing itself in response to changing circumstances. From the carved amulets of ancient Egypt to the hypersigils of the digital age, sigils have served as vessels for human desire, creativity, and agency. They remind us that symbols are not mere decorations but living instruments of transformation, tools for shaping both our inner landscapes and the world around us. As we move forward into an era of unprecedented technological and cultural change, the evolution of sigil magic offers valuable insights into the power of symbols and the art of intentional creation. Whether practiced in solitude or shared across global networks, sigil magic invites us to participate in the ongoing dance between imagination and reality, to become conscious co-authors of our own stories. In the chapters that follow, we will explore how these principles can be harnessed through narrative magic and hypersigils, opening new possibilities for personal and collective transformation. Chapter 3: Narrative as a Magical Technology. The human mind is a pattern-seeking instrument, one that finds meaning in the world by weaving disparate experiences into the threads of story. Long before the advent of written language, our ancestors gathered around fires, sharing tales of creation, survival, triumph, and loss. These stories were not mere entertainment. They were the original technologies for transmitting knowledge, shaping beliefs, and guiding behavior. In the modern world, we may no longer depend on oral tradition for survival, but the power of narrative endures, as potent and transformative as ever. To understand narrative as a magical technology is to recognize its capacity to shape reality, not just through the influence it exerts on individuals and cultures, but through the way it structures consciousness itself. At its core, magic is the art of causing change in accordance with will. This simple definition, articulated by Aleister Crowley and echoed by countless practitioners before and after him, places emphasis on intention and manifestation. The magician is not merely a dreamer but an active participant in the unfolding of reality. Narrative, too, operates on this principle. When we tell a story, we do more than describe events. We imbue them with meaning, assign them roles in a larger pattern, and crucially, invite others to see the world through our chosen lens. In doing so, we do not just reflect reality, we create it. A structure of narrative is itself a kind of spell. Every story, no matter how simple or complex, is built upon the scaffolding of beginning, middle, and end. You have been listening to an extended preview of Hypersigils and Narrative Magick. To continue reading, visit the LLH Media Store or the book's Amazon listing.